Now I'm going to talk about a piece that's very popular at weddings, The Prince of Denmark's March by Jeremiah Clarke. Clarke was an 18th century English Baroque composer. This piece was actually originally a keyboard piece, but was arranged in the 19th century for solo trumpet, strings and organ. It's actually an arrangement of that adaptation that I'm going to play today. We need a solo trumpet stop. Luckily on this organ we have one. It's called the cornopian, quite similar to the trumpet. Possibly a little bit thin and reedy sounding by itself, so we'll take an 8-foot stop. We'll try the violin diapason. Both of those stops together. So already a warmer sound. We might decide to go a step further and add a 4-foot stop, the 4-foot Gems horn. A little bit brighter. We're going to need an accompaniment for that. Obviously that's going to have to be on the grate, as our solo is now on the swell. Quite an upbeat piece. Let's have quite a strong accompaniment. I think the sound of the trumpet can stomach that. So we'll take the open diapason 8-foot, we'll take the principal 4-foot, and see how that sounds. Possibly going to be too much, but we'll see. I think it is indeed a little bit much. Let's get rid of that 4-foot stop. We'll try the open 8-foot by itself. Definitely strong enough. So let's add the pedals. We're going to take our Bourdon 16-foot and we're going to add the coupler grate to pedals. Let's see how that sounds together. So I think that accompaniment is ample. It is essentially a continuo part and doesn't need to be too dominant. Now when we get to the next part that would have been played by the Tutti orchestra, we possibly need a little bit more. If I play that on the grate by itself, as in the opening registration, it'll sound like this. Quite a nice sound, but for a wedding we might want it to sound a little bit stronger than that. That will involve pulling some stops while we're playing. We have some mechanical aids, some pedals, quite large levers with some preset combinations. So we need to try them out. The two on this side, on the right-hand side, are for the grate. This is the first one. Let's see what happens. Right, so it pulls out 2 stops for us. Going to be quite a soft sound. The stop diapason 8-foot and the 4-foot flute. So this would sound like this. Could possibly be our accompaniment. Let's try that. I think that would work. If we then look and see what the other pedal does, it's likely to be a bigger sound. Let's see. Oh, right, it pulls out the open diapason and the 4-foot principal. So that could be our Tutti. Let's hear that. Okay, so we could decide to play this piece using these combination levers. The first lever is our accompaniment, so we'd start the piece with the solo on the swell, accompaniment on the grate. Some organs, of course, don't have registrational aids. They don't have these levers with pre-selected combinations. and maybe we don't particularly like those combinations and they don't suit the music we're playing. In that case, we have to pull the stops ourselves while we're playing, or maybe one would have an assistant who could pull the stops with some small indications in the score showing the assistant when they have to be pulled. I quite liked the accompaniment for this piece with the open diapason on the grate. That wasn't an option with the combination pedals. So let's see how we can use that accompaniment and then create a tutti sound by manually pulling the stops while we're playing. So this was the accompaniment. And when we come to the tutti, we could add the 4-foot principle and the 2-foot principle. The 2-foot wasn't on the combination pedal. This would sound like this for the tutti. Maybe a little bit more appropriate for a wedding, a very bright sound. So if we play that in context, I'll play the transition between solo part and tutti part. So one needs to time that very carefully. It often needs a little bit of practice, and every organ's different. We have to be very clear about where we're going to pull the stops. Sometimes they are at the top of the jam, like here. Sometimes they might be lower down. Every organ, of course, is different. Let's try the other situation when we're going from a tutti sound back to the solo sound. So we're ending the tutti. We have to be quite quick with putting in the stops. Sometimes we need to shorten the last chord in order to give ourselves time for the registration change. So here we go. So there are some possibilities of how we're going to register for this piece. Some organs, of course, don't have a trumpet. So then we have to try to find an appropriate sound that's going to be quite bright, quite solistic. So let's pretend we don't have this trumpet. We're going to look for other possibilities. I would suggest we look on the grate, as that's the manual with the strongest sounding stops. We'll take the open diapason 8-foot. We need a strong one. We'll take the 4-foot principle. So we've got an 8 and 4. Let's see how that sounds. Already quite dominant, quite bright. Let's add the 2-foot principle. That'll make it a little bit more sparkly. We will now look for accompaniment, obviously on the swell. Let's take the violin diapason, and as an 8-foot sound, I think we'll definitely need a 4-foot in this case, as we've got a very strong solo. And of course, we'll take the swell to pedals. Good. Maybe we don't like that added sparkle of the 2-foot principle as a solo. Let's just see how that sounds without it. If we had a 12th or a Nazard, preferably a principal sounding mutation, that would also sound very good here. That makes a bit more of a solistic sound. A lot of organs have mutations and they can be used very well in place of a reed, especially when the solo's in the soprano register. If we go with this option of the solo on the grate, 8-foot principle combined with a 4-foot principle, we need to find a tutti section. In some ways it's easier because we can simply take the 8 and 4-foot principle on the grate as our tutti. It's been our solo. It'll also make a good tutti sound. So we could end the solo and go into the tutti section like this. You might notice that the pedal is now a little bit weak because it's coupled to the swell. So another way around that is to make our tutti section on the swell. At the moment we've got the 8-foot violin diapason, we've got the 4-foot Gems horn. We could add the mixture to that to make a really full sound. Then the tutti section would be like this. That will of course involve pulling a stop between sections, putting it back in for the solo sections. Let's see how that works. When we get to this part of the piece, we can aid our registration change by taking all the notes with one hand. So it could be like this.